Welcome to Tech Talk, brought to you by NowMedia Networks. Join host Greg Schaffer as he takes you into the fast-paced world of technology, exploring breakthroughs in AI, cybersecurity, and beyond. Discover the strategies and insights driving today's tech revolution.
The Internet of Things. It sounds like some scary movie from the 1950s, and it can be rather scary. Welcome back to Tech Talk. We're going to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things. It's not terribly scary if you kind of break it down as to what it is and what some of the security concerns are. And really, it's all the things that we have in our home right now. Like there are things that you can do, like have your lights controlled by the internet, your thermostat. Well, here to help us unpack a lot about the Internet of Things is Peter Gregory. He's a security leader and an advisor. He's the author of more than 50 books on information security and other things. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Greg, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me on today.
So I really want to dig into this Internet of Things because it can sound like that it's rather scary. And let's start out with, what are some of the more pressing concerns related to this growing use of the Internet of Things, not only from a security perspective, but other use perspective as well?
Yeah, let's see. Great question, Greg. I would start off by saying that the main problem lies in how IoT products are designed and built. Often we see substandard security features like vulnerability management. We see brittle IP stacks, which means they're not very resilient to just regular network traffic. Many IoT products lack the ability for vendors to push security updates and patches. Many IoT products have generic and or hard-coded login credentials, say, for a security camera to log into a server somewhere. Sometimes you find that the code in that camera has generic credentials that are burned in and can't be changed. Also, lack of device hardening, meaning that a lot of IoT devices are not hardened or made resilient to resist attacks by attackers. And finally, there is a lack of encrypted communications. One could say, well, it's just a thermostat, or it's just, let's say it's just a thermostat, but really, here, let me attack your thermostat and log in using a simple exploit because it's not hardened in any way. And I'm going to change your HVAC system settings and sabotage your data center. So you still think that IoT security is not a problem?
Well, I think that from a use case, sometimes perhaps us as homeowners and business owners, we don't sometimes understand that there are security concerns with these sorts of devices. And so I want to kind of, when we talk about information security and risk management, we talk about balancing the risk versus the reward. I have to ask, why are some of the reasons that folks might end up using these devices? I mean, why would you want to have your thermostat, for example, like on the internet?
Well, these devices really enable convenience for their users. Continuing in the thermostat example, it enables, say, a homeowner or small business owner to monitor and manage the environmental controls even remotely, even if they aren't in their business. In general, IoT products enable remote management and or monitoring of many things, from manufacturing assembly lines to video surveillance to smart TVs, thermostats, and other appliances. I mean, in some cases, I think they've gone a little too far. I mean, really, do I need a smart coffee maker so that I can push go from my smartphone before I roll out of bed and have coffee, waiting for me in the kitchen? I mean, the convenience, there's risk as well. And often we don't understand that there is that trade-off.
I was actually thinking the coffee maker is a great example, but I was thinking about the refrigerator where you can track your inventory so that you know what to pick up. But we had technology back in our day where we would take like paper and write lists and open up the door and then put something else on the list so that we knew what to. So yeah, there is the convenience factor, but there are other ways to do it that are more secure. And of course, when we're talking about paper is pretty hard to hack over the net, of course. It's one of the most secure communications out there until you let it out of your physical presence, and that's a whole other discussion. But
Sure.
let's talk a little bit about safeguarding these devices because there are benefits for Internet of Things. I personally, one of my favorites are the light controls. You can control lights both automatically, like have a timer on them, but you can also control them when you're away from the house, make it look like maybe that there's something going on there and all that. And cameras are great as well too. But we need to make sure that these are secure. So what are some things that businesses, and then by extension, maybe what are some things that homeowners can do to help secure these devices? Because this adoption is just going to continue. I mean, how many on average do we see in a home nowadays? 30, 40, maybe even more?
Oh, for sure, Greg. And what I'd say, and some of these things though are difficult for non-technical small business and homeowners to do. For instance, changing the as delivered administrative password on a device. I mean, even that can be, it's easy for us, but it can be daunting for a non-technical person who just wants a security camera or a smart fridge or whatever the smart thing is, right? But a few of the simple safeguards are this. Number one, have all of your smart devices that, those that are Wi-Fi anyway, have them connect to your guest network instead of your internal network. This way, if one of your devices is compromised based on some of the issues we talked about a minute ago, then a compromised IoT device is not going to be able to access other devices in your internal network, which could be, laptops, desktops, servers, storage systems, and other IoT devices.
What about perhaps, is there any way that maybe the Internet of Things manufacturers might come out with some easier ways for consumers to make sure that the product is secure right out of the box, so to speak?
Oh, for sure, Greg. One thing that have looked into recently is that the FCC has recently adopted what they call an IoT device trust mark. Now, I don't specialize and spend a lot of time in IoT security. So what I couldn't tell you offhand is whether that trust mark is implemented today or is a future implementation. I do liken this to, say, UL approved or something for appliances that you buy, or the CE mark in Europe. However, that trust mark idea is not going to retroactively refit everything we already have. I I don't have real statistics on this, but I would gather that people replace their Wi-Fi access point every, say, 4 to 6 years. And so if FCC comes out with a trust mark this year, then the next time you buy an access point, maybe you'll have richer information that helps you understand which products are more secure than others, but it's not going to do a thing for all the stuff you've already got.
And you bring up a good point, though, about just talking about the lifespan of devices. There's also the security aspect. I know that there has been talk about cameras that have been compromised that are no longer supported because they can't be upgraded with the latest and greatest security features. And yet people, they would probably be reluctant, and I'm talking about the homes now, to remove the cameras because they're still working, but there's still that security aspect there. So what I'm hearing from you, though, is it correct to say that you should periodically replace your equipment, particularly if it's no longer supported by the manufacturer?
Well, it's definitely a consideration, Greg. I mean, it doesn't mean you need to mark your calendar and throw all your stuff out every 3 or 4 years. But on the other hand, it's really wise to just be cognizant of the fact that you've got these IoT devices. Some may not be secure, and many people, me included, at times, I just attach them to my internal network because it's just easy to do. But as
Mhm.
I mentioned a minute ago, if you can put them on a separate guest network or just a separate network for IoT, that can be really helpful. Then again, typical homeowners, even this is going to feel like a tall order because, I get it, non-technical people, they just want to plug it in and make it work without having to do a lot of extra steps.
Well, for the couple minutes we have left, let's shift over now to businesses again, and
Yeah.
what are a couple of the standards and practices that businesses that obviously would have probably some more access to the technical knowledge, what they can do to help secure their business networks from the using the Internet of Things type devices?
For sure, Greg. The organization called NIST, or the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, they have a wealth of guidance on all different topics of cybersecurity, privacy, and more. And they have a website dedicated to IoT security with content for IoT manufacturers. And there's a document called the NISTer 8259 series.
Hmm.
Then there are standards from NIST for enterprises, big and small, and there's a standard called NIST Special Publication 800-213. And then, as I mentioned, there's this, new FCC trust mark for consumers. So there's a lot of information out there, and NIST is really just the beginning of good resources that homeowners and businesses who are concerned about security with IoT devices can learn more about some of the steps they can take to improve their security. And of course, you can always ask ChatGPT, "Hey, I've got this security camera. Should I consider it secure? How can I secure it? What else should I do?" So there's, you can sometimes get good advice like that, but again, you got to be careful, and you can't take everything Gen AI, gives you to the bank.
Oh, absolutely. You should always verify, trust but verify with ChatGPT. But that's a great start too. And that's why I love these conversations because I inevitably learn something. I'll have to look up NIST 800-213. I'm not familiar with that standard. There's only like a couple of NIST standards out there. I'm only kidding. There are a lot out there. So
Couple hundred, yeah.
a couple of hundred, yeah. Well, fascinating stuff, Peter. You always bring some great information to share. Really appreciate you being on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Greg. And I really enjoy conversations like this.
And we'll be right back. Generative AI has been around for not too long. It's become very popular. And so suddenly people are talking about artificial intelligence. But actually, artificial intelligence has been around for quite some time. And so to help unpack some of the potential and the concerns and the opportunities associated with artificial intelligence, Byron Reese, author of The Fourth Age, Smart Robots, Conscious Computers, and the Future of Humanity, joins us to help unpack all of this. Byron, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
That is a long title. I stumbled over it, but I understand that it's probably going to be rather complicated. We'll talk about that in a minute, but let's kind of begin with, how do you see the relationship between artificial intelligence and human potential evolving over the next decade? I mean, there's the dystopian view, I guess, that we see in the movies sometime. Are we going to see that, or is it going to be a little bit less intense?
Well, I hope there's a third choice, and it's not awful, slightly less than awful. And those are my only two choices. I think it's going to usher in a new golden age of humanity. I mean, if you really want to tell the story in a long form, I think that, I think it's a 4 billion year old story. We started 3.5 billion years, life just stored data in DNA, and then it moved into the brains, and we externalized it and wrote it. And we slowly learned how to save knowledge so that generation by generation is accumulated. And now with this generative AI, we're finally bringing it all together into one thing. You know, when you search for Google, like what's the difference between a cold and the flu, it gives you 30 million answers, but you just want one. And that's because it's all still siloed. And so what we're going to see, I think, is something that will be basically a collective memory of the planet, every cause and effect. So that, you know, they say Solomon was the wisest person who ever lived. Well, everybody in the future will be wiser than Solomon because everybody's going to have the life experiences of everybody who lived before them informing their decisions. I think it's the beginning of a shift as profound as the evolution of brains, of life itself. Like, this is a big deal.
So adding on the layer of the interface of now the generative AI, that's sort of expanding the use so that everybody can tap into this global knowledge?
I think so. I mean, artificial intelligence is an unfortunate term because it means two unrelated things, unrelated.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them you obliquely referred to when you said we see in the movies. That's something called general AI. And we don't have that. Nobody knows how to build it. And I hold a minority view, probably 5% among AI people, that it's impossible. It cannot be done. It is not possible because people are not machines. And if you are not a machine, then we're not going to build a machine that duplicates what you do. Then there's another kind of AI called narrow AI, and that's what we do know how to do. And that's where you just take a lot of data and you look for patterns in it and use those patterns to make predictions. And we're real good at that, and we're getting better. But that isn't going to take over the world. I mean, what people worry about with that is, you know, the jobs are going away or something. But that isn't going to wake up, and it's not Skynet. It's just actually a pretty boring technology.
We've talked about on this show beforehand how just the internet in itself has helped with it. Didn't necessarily take away jobs, but it helped with productivity. Certainly, some jobs were changed, but in the long run, it really advanced to an extent human evolution or human interaction.
100%. Mm-hmm. 100%.
And so you're thinking that AI is going to continue to take that path.
Absolutely. I've spent a lot of time researching this, and I think the half-life of a job is about 50 years. I think every 50 years, we lose half of all the jobs. I think we've lost about half of them since 75, and they lost about half of them since 25, and they lost about half of them. So over and over, we're losing about half the jobs as technology advances, and yet we maintain full employment and rising wages. So how do you do that? How are you constantly shedding jobs? And it's because technology creates these new opportunities. Now, the reason it freaks people out, and we'll use your example, the internet. If you went back to the 90s and you said, "Hey, in the future, billions of people are going to have this. What's going to happen to jobs?" They would have said, "That's a job killer. The yellow pages are going away, and travel agents are going away, and stockbrokers are going away, and newspapers are going away, and shopping malls are going away." And you would have been right about everything. You would have gotten it all right. But what you would not have said, what they would not have said is, "Oh, there's going to be Uber and eBay and Etsy and Airbnb and all these new things." So it's easy to see one side of the equation, what the technology is going to eliminate, but none of us can see what it's going to create. The thing to always remember is these are, as you said, productivity tools. And increasing human productivity is always, that's an absolute statement, always good for people. And if you don't believe that, you should advocate for a law that requires everybody to work with one arm tied behind their back. Because if you did that, you would have created a bunch of new jobs because you need twice as many people to do anything. But you know what? Those jobs wouldn't pay anything because you just destroyed everybody's productivity. So what these technologies do is they give everybody a third arm. They're good for everyone, everyone.
Well, let's dig a little bit into your book, and that's The Fourth Age. In your book, you talk about AI and the automation's impact on society. The concept of the half-life being 50 years, I've not heard that before. I love that, and that makes total sense. And it kind of prompts you to want to think forward because, as you said, a lot of the things that we take for granted today, Uber being a great example, nobody could have even fathomed about back then. It would not have even entered into anyone's mind. So you're going to have this impact on society. What do you think are going to be like some or the most transformative change coming down? I mean, can you actually predict what the next 30, 40 years are going to look like?
I think we'll lose half of all the jobs. Unfortunately, it's actually going quite slow. For all these people have been predicting for so many years that we're about to have all this unemployment. What we see is the opposite. I can't think of one job that's been eliminated in the last 5 years. Oh, why? So this idea that these things are just going to wholesale wash them away is just wrong. I mean, what you said is really true. When a new technology comes out, you can only see it in terms of the old technology. So when TV came out, they said it's radio with pictures, and so the first TV shows were just people in front of microphones reading. Only years later do you get, Seinfeld and all these other things. And what you just said is entirely correct. It takes us a while. Nobody, and it will be the young people who come up with these kind of new ways, because we're people my age are kind of locked into it. We aren't going to be able to see what is possible with the new technology in the way that somebody who is not encumbered by all the old technology is able to.
And I think it's important to point out that I think arguably, like Bill Gates, for example, one of the most could be called one of the more visionaries, if you will, of the computer age, the founder of Microsoft and all of that. But even he said, and I might get the quote a little bit wrong, but I believe he said in the earlier mid-90s that nobody's going to have any need for more than 640K on their machine for as far as memory goes. And you couldn't run a simple app on your phone if you just had that amount. So there's certainly going to be some opportunities for enhancing human creativity and problem solving. Got one or two examples of that, perhaps?
Certainly. I have a deep held belief that if there is a job that a machine can do, a job that a machine can, in theory, do, whether you have the machine or not, whether the machine's been invented or not, if a machine can do it, if you make a person do that job, we have a word for that. That word is dehumanizing. What you're saying to the person is, you're like, hey, listen, a machine can do this job. I just don't have the machine. So what I need you to do is be the machine. I don't need anything about you that's human. I just want you to be a machine. And you see, if you accept the premise, can a machine do it? Yes. Then it is beneath the dignity of a person. So as far as predictions go, any job that a machine can, in theory, do will be replaced, will be done by machines, and that will free people up to do things only people can do. And the idea that people aren't up to that or something, I mean, it's going to, the history of this planet is, survival has been kind of like until 100 years ago, 90% of us, all of us had to grow food. And that was it. And so Leonardo da Vinci 1,000 years ago, and Mary Curie, and all that was lost. And finally, we're going to automate away anything a machine can do. And in doing so, we're going to free people up to be people. And that's never happened before. People have been plow mules and all of that.
I think that's a wonderful view of the future. So how can businesses prepare for that sort of a workforce where you're not necessarily just employing people because they can act like a machine, but rather that, as you can say, they act as a person? How is that going to change the workforce?
What I would think about it is not kind of as a break of some kind. This is all has been going on for centuries, and it's just a continuation of that. So technology has kind of two things. It creates new opportunities that are high value, high skill, high wage. And what it destroys are really low end, rote kinds of things that can be automated. And so what I encourage businesses to do, and then what I encourage individuals to do, like if you're worried about this, or your kids, like what are they going to do for a living? The thing is just every day wake up and ask if there's some tiny little thing you do that's machine work that you can automate. Just the smallest thing in the world, a automatic forward, or something you have to forward all the time, or this and that. So every day, look and say, is there some tiny thing I can automate? And if you do, and it saves you 3 minutes in a day, then say, what can I use that 3 minutes for with new technology? And if you just keep doing that day to day, a little bit at a time, you're always going to be automating away. What you said is it changed a lot of jobs. You're going to be automating away lots of parts of your job that can be automated away, and then using technology to create new opportunities. And I think that's accessible for everybody, up and down kind of education level, age, all of that. That's just humanity. Everybody's got a third arm. What do you want to do with it? What you don't want to do with it is just be a three-armed machine.
With every new technology, and every technology, I guess you could say, it's like there are ways you can use it, and certainly there would have to be some ethical considerations with regards to how you're using AI. So what ethical considerations would come up here, or is it kind of the same thing where it's the same as any tool? It's you're just using the tool to perform a function, and the ethics come into the function that you're performing?
I think so. I mean, in the end, artificial intelligence is just math, just math, just numbers, adding and subtracting numbers. And what has happened is because of movies and all of that, we have a different image of it. And so we all do something called reasoning from fictional evidence. We take that fictional evidence and we say that looks really plausible, and we start doing that. That isn't what this is. This is a technology that brings together the knowledge of humans and uses it to project the future. And now that we're better at collecting that knowledge and we have more compute, we're going to get better at doing that. I think we will do what Aeschylus predicted thousands of years ago when he said, "We will tame the savage heart of man and make gentle the life of this world."
That's a great place to leave it. I love that view of the future, and really appreciate you coming on to unpack some of this with regards to AI. The book, again, is The Fourth Age. Byron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Tech Talk. I'm Greg Schaffer. Happy to have you here. You know, I've been in technology for some time. I like to equate it to the beginning of the days of the internet. In fact, when I first started, there wasn't such a thing as twisted pair Ethernet, and that's been a long time ago. Seen a lot of changes during that time. And so has my guest. Peter Gregory joins us for this segment. He has authored many books, and he is a technology and cybersecurity and privacy leader, and he is also part of the advisory boards for the University of Washington and Seattle University. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Greg, thanks for having me on. It's great to see you and be here.
So I started out by talking about the fact that I've been involved in this wonderful world of technology for some time, and I know you have too. So why don't we start by why and how, just a couple of minutes, why and how you decided to enter into the tech field?
Greg, this goes back to my early teen years when I became an electronics hobbyist, inspired in part by my uncle Clark Harris of Los Angeles, who was an amateur astronomer and an inventor. So electronics was my passion all through high school. I went to the University of Nevada, Reno, and was in an electrical engineering bachelor's program and discovered computer programming there. This was in the mid-'70s. People didn't have computers at home. I mean, nobody did, right? So programming classes, more electronics and electrical engineering classes, and I just really fell in love with just everything about computers and made a pivot to that, and that's been my career from then till now. I've worn pretty much every hat in IT, or MIS as it was originally called, and my career has gone from then till now, and here we are today after 40 plus years of working in IT, engineering, and security leadership for about the last 22 or 23 years.
And it's really amazing to think about the changes that have occurred in the tech field since then. We take for granted the whole internet ecosystem, if you will. We never had anything like smartphones back then. They weren't even really thought of unless you think about maybe the old Dick Tracy comics, which had the wristwatch camera phones, which I remember back in the day as a child, like thinking that'll never happen. It's amazing to see what's happened over the last 40 years plus. During that time, what are some of the, in your eyes, what are some of the more significant changes that have occurred in technology, and also how that has affected our lives?
I'd say, Greg, I mean, big picture, I think the biggest change that we've seen in our lifetime is just simply the miniaturization of computing power. One of my first jobs was a student employment operating Nevada Reno's CDC 6600 mainframe, which was a supercomputer designed by Seymour Cray in the 60s, and Nevada Reno had that machine for 10 or 12 years or more. And today, this little thing here in my hand has vastly more computing power than that very massive system that I operated in 76, 77.
Really amazing to see how the technology has evolved. I remember seeing an article at one point in time which mentioned that the space shuttle, which of course is a technology which is now obsolete, but even back then it was new technology in the 80s that they were having problems sourcing materials for. If I remember correctly, they were looking for 8088 chips. They couldn't find any or many to keep it sustained up through the 90s and the 2000s. How do you think that, though, this miniaturization has affected our lives? You mentioned the iPhone and how that has such greater computer power. I always think about I always get back to space. I always think about like the moon lander too, that our iPhones or our smartphones rather have more computing power than the entire Apollo spacecraft did. How do you feel that that's affected our lives?
It's Greg, technology has made our lives far more convenient. I mean, again, from this thing, I can run my entire life from my smartphone if I had to. I can pay my bills. I can pay my taxes. I can, order and purchase anything and everything I need. I can be a journalist. I can, I have access to, virtually all of the knowledge that mankind has accumulated and documented from the beginning of written history to this very day. It is all at our fingertips instantly.
And you've been a lover of technology. You talk about technology frequently. You write about technology, having authored more than 50 books on cybersecurity. How did you get started in authoring books?
The way I got into publishing, Greg, is that back in the early 90s, I was an employee, a consultant for World Vision. They were upgrading all of their back office computing from mainframes to Unix and Informix, relational database management systems. One of my colleagues there, her name was Liz, an Informix employee, and she was writing her first book called Informix Online Performance Tuning. And she and the publisher enlisted me to be one of the tech reviewers for that book. That got me a relationship with one of the top publishers in technology, Prentice Hall. And from over the next 5 years, I ended up being a tech editor for numerous books that Prentice Hall was publishing. And then in the late 90s, I had found an opportunity to write my first book entitled Solaris Security. And then from then till now, I've been very fortunate in that publishers mostly come to me saying, would you please write this book or that book for us? And I've just, developed my talent and skill and passion for helping tens of thousands of security professionals expand and further their careers and in turn, helping them to learn how to better protect their information and their organization's information from criminals.
You mentioned Solaris, and of course that was a Unix-based operating system back from Sun Microsystems, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
In the 90s, I remember having, I believe it was called a Spark Station on my desk at one point in time.
Yeah.
All this changes. It almost makes cybersecurity rather unique in the rate of change. How do you address that in your books on cybersecurity?
The way I address it in my books is I not only present facts and techniques and tools and standard ways of doing things, but I also endeavor to teach my readers how to learn for themselves and how to find various information sources that will provide reliable, relevant information for them in whatever field and subfield that they might be in. So my mission has been not to just teach them, but to teach them how to fish, because there's only one of me and there's a lot of them. So helping others become self-sufficient and to take responsibility for their career, to move their career forward in a way that they want, and to learn for themselves on how to learn.
I love that servant attitude, and it definitely does help with trying to understand that it's not necessarily easy to learn new technology, new techniques, new processes as it changes so rapidly. And I know your books have helped many studying for various certifications and some other concepts out there. But one of your books is a little bit different. Actually helped me when I was writing information security for small and mid-sized businesses, and that is The Art of Writing Technical Books. Now, tell me a little bit about the difference between writing technical books and other books, other factual books, and what's like one or a couple of advice points that you would give to those in the tech field who, and it doesn't have to necessarily be cybersecurity, those in the tech field who feel like they have a book within them and want to get it out?
Great question, Greg. I've been wanting to write that book for years, ever since I had written my first couple of books back in the early 2000s. I started becoming a lot of people's best friend. They said, "Hey, Peter, you've been published. Help me get published. I have a book I want to write. Can you help me? How should I proceed with this?" And I helped a lot of people get published. But all along that way, I thought, I've really got to write a book on how to get it done, because I can reach far more people that way. And 2.5, 3 years ago, I finally had a break between books that was big enough that I could and did get that book written and published. It's a niche audience there, technology people who want to get published, but I explain the whole thing from end to end, from idea to the actual writing and organizing and getting your tech all figured out, to working with publishers, negotiating contracts, promoting your book, working with co-authors, and all of the nuts and bolts involved in writing.
Fascinating stuff. And like I said beforehand, it really helped me, and I appreciate it so much. I also appreciate you taking the time to join us today on Tech Talk. It's been informative. We'll have to have you back sometime.
Absolutely. Been my pleasure, Greg. And I'm looking forward to watching other episodes of your show.
And we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Tech Talk. I'm Greg Schaffer. Dr. Pamela Gay is back with us today. Really excited to continue our conversation with her. She is, of course, the senior scientist at the Planetary Institute. Planetary Science Institute. She is also the co-host of AstronomyCast, host of Escape Velocity Space News, and does a whole lot more. Dr. Gay, thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love new shows getting a start and getting to be part of seeing you on your climb.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to discussing more about everything space related. Of course, as I mentioned before, I have been a huge amateur space fan. I guess you can call me a fan of citizen science. And I know you talk a lot about that on your website at starstrider.com. But can you explain a little bit, first of all, what is citizen science?
The basic idea of citizen science is any of us have the ability to look out at this universe that we share, whether it be with our eyes, with our telescopes, or using software to explore existing data. And what makes someone a citizen scientist versus a professional scientist is citizen scientists are just volunteers. They're people who dedicate their time to expanding what we know by looking, reporting what they see, and sharing it out to people who help use it to publish papers. So I, as a professional researcher, get paid to work with people who are volunteering hours for projects ranging from looking to see when that nova goes off this summer somewhere in the sky. We hope we're waiting for a star that we know gets significantly brighter every few decades to do its thing. Who we're looking at people who are reporting comets as they plunge into the sun. We're working with people, with my project in particular, who are willing to help us map out the surface of other worlds in our solar system, because there's still things that our human eyes and brain can do that software can't. And until computer vision gets a whole lot better, we need everyday people to help us map out other worlds in our solar system.
Does somebody have to have credentials or a degree or pass a test, or can it literally be anybody with in the case of astronomy, with a telescope and a desire?
In general, we require people to demonstrate a certain level of skill. For instance, the Minor Planet Center in Boston, they take in asteroid data collected by people all over the world who are looking at the sky and often discovering new asteroids just crossing through their images. Now, for the Minor Planet Center to be able to say, yes, you who we've never met before, yes, you have discovered a new asteroid, those people need to submit data on known objects that demonstrate the capabilities of them, their equipment, and their process. Once those folks get validated, they can go off and discover new objects. With the stuff we do with fully online citizen science, we have training images that we have people go through, and they mark out what they see in these images. And using those training images, we can say, yeah, this is someone who's actually doing a valid job and not somebody's cat that has absconded with the mouse and is trying to do science. And so there's a validation to everything that gets done, but anyone who's willing to take the time to learn a process can participate. And it's something where, if you think about it, we've always been engaging students in helping us in our research. And why can't someone like you be my peer, my colleague, my student who's learning the process?
You know, I'm going to reach back to my memory back more than 20, 25 years ago. And I'm going to guess 96, but I might be off by a little bit. And one of the coolest things that I remember as sort of an astronomy nerd was when, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a comet broke apart and collided and basically was sucked up by Jupiter. Shoemaker-Levy, I think it was, or Levy, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Shoemaker-Levy 9, that was the summer, I believe, of 1993. I was
off by
working
a few years.
Peak Observatory. Yeah, well, I was there at the observatory as a student when this happened. And so it's a strong memory for me. It was the first time I ever used this thing we call the internet today. And so it was a really cool summer.
But they were not citizen science advisors or
Levy
anything.
Was.
Oh, Levy.
So here's the thing about those discoverers. It was Eugene Shoemaker, who is a planetary scientist, or he was. He's now passed away. But David Levy, he's an English major. He's a writer. He's someone who's been doing amateur astronomy since he was a small child. And over the decades of his life, he memorized so much of the sky that he could look out and say, yes, that field that has this fuzzy thing in it, that fuzzy thing wasn't there yesterday. We have now discovered a comet. And this was one of his passions that he did with his own personal equipment sitting outside.
So I guess then that could probably be one of the more famous examples of a citizen science contribution to astronomy.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask, well,
exactly.
what's a really good one? And there's one right there. That's amazing that anybody can just, with the passion and of course with some vetting, actually be a part of this. But it's sometimes difficult for folks in the general public because some of this can be really complex. I know as a science fiction fan, I always get a little bit disturbed and perturbed whenever I hear or see, I'm sure you do too, where they kind of really mess up astronomy in shows. Like, Earth is like rotating in the galaxy or something like that, or we're in multiple galaxies, right? Or something along those lines. So there are some complex things going on here. Just the idea of orbital mechanics and how a comet would hit a planet, for example. But you seem to be able to make these complex scientific concepts consumable by the public, which I think is wonderful. How do you do that?
It's honestly just, we each have different things that we're passionate about doing. I too am completely a lover of science fiction, and if any of you out there ever need a science advisor for your science fiction, I am here for you. And growing up, I just wanted to understand all the science in these stories that I loved, all of the science that inspired the names that of the characters. For instance, in Battlestar Galactica, that was my first passion. And along the way, everyone's like, hey, what are you doing? And when you're a kid, you learn to either get beat up or break things down into terms that make things interesting to your peers. And I was that spacey, geeky child from second grade on who was trying to explain space, trying to get other people interested, writing fan fiction. I was that kind of a nerd as a youngling. And I just kept going. And the first time I ever gave a public talk on astronomy was actually when I was in high school. I'd gone as part of a peacekeeping exchange to the Soviet Union to study at the 6-meter observatory. And when I came back, I was asked to talk about that observatory. And here I was, a kid, talking to a room full of people old enough to be my parents and grandparents about my time on the top of a mountain, half a world away. And I wanted to make them both know I understood my science and make them understand my science. And that's been my goal ever since, to make sure I understand what I'm doing at such a deep level that I can make somebody else both care about it and also understand it at least a surface level.
I remember, not directly, I was a little bit too young for this, but during what would be, I guess, considered one of the golden ages of space exploration during the 60s. It captured the imagination of children, the moon landing with Apollo 11. I was only 2 at the time, that's why I didn't remember that, but I did remember one of the later ones, I think probably the last one, which I think was 17. Lots happened in space exploration, you know, and that was also the beginning of the golden age of sci-fi. You had Star Trek, which was a radically different show, showed us being able to get to planets just almost like that. You mentioned Battlestar Galactica. Of course, Star Wars was during this time as well, too. So we've kind of grown up with the idea that it should be so easy to get to planets, but it's really not that easy because of the vast distances. So we're currently looking at eventually trying to get to Mars, maybe in our lifetimes. That might happen. Well, what are some of your thoughts as far as space exploration? Obviously, we're not going to see anything outside of the solar system as far as human travel goes. So let's keep it like kind of local to the local solar system.
So this is one of these things where it all comes down to how much money are the nations of the world willing to put into space exploration. Going to space is an endeavor that requires multinational cooperation. It requires thousands of people working to innovate new technologies that have never existed before. And this isn't a cheap process. This is actually something I'm doing a lot of writing on lately because of NASA's current plans to return to the moon with the Artemis missions and the unfortunate recent cancellation of the Viper rover, that it just got so over budget that in order to keep everything else going, for want of $100 million, a completed mission has been canceled. All it needed was to be launched. And so we have to find the willingness to say, we're going to spend what is necessary to ensure our astronauts get to space safe, stay in space safe and healthy, which means solving radiation problems, solving nutrition problems. How do we feed people on these long duration missions? And then we have to develop all of the technology that allows them to not just go there, but come back. We were working towards testing some ideas with the Mars sample return mission, which is, again, also something that is on the edge of cancellation because the budget that NASA has is just so small and has been held flat for so many years, while the costs of facilities, the costs of everything associated with doing science is actually rising slightly faster than inflation. So if you hold NASA's budget flat relative to inflation, but all the costs are going up, that means that year on year, we're actually seeing a decrease in the money available to do science. And we can't do the innovation necessary if we don't have the money to pay humans and develop the technologies that allows us to become a multiplanetary species.
Which is so unfortunate because we've learned so much from exploration, and some of our technologies, if we couldn't do a lot of the communication that we do. The internet, a lot of that came from satellite communications, and even Tang, I remember back in the day. So, well, Dr. Gay, we could talk about this for hours on end. I find it fascinating. Really appreciate you taking time out to chat a little bit more space with us today.
Always happy to be here. Always happy to come back. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about things I love on your wonderful new show.
Oh, I appreciate you coming on, and we'll be right back.
This has been a NowMedia Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.